I'm Philadelphia Archbishop Nelson Perez, and you're listening to the True Philadelphia podcast with Matt O'Donnell.
Archbishop Nelson Perez became the boss of Philadelphia's 1.4 million Catholics in the beginning of the year, and then everything changed. Churches suspended Mass, public Easter services were canceled, staffers were told to stay home. Suddenly, being the Archbishop of the 6th largest Archdiocese in the U.S. became completely different. That is the beginning of our conversation, but not our focus. We talk about how Archbishop Perez found out he got the job, about God, heaven, leadership, and his bud Pope Francis in this intimate conversation. Archbishop Nelson Perez on his very strange and unexpected start as head of the Philadelphia Archdiocese and his role as a spiritual leader of hope and resolve. Right now in the True Philadelphia podcast. Archbishop Perez, so nice to finally meet you.
Thank you. Great to meet you too, Matt.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, all things considering. Not exactly.
What are you thinking about right now?
Well, it's not exactly the way I had planned to come out of the gate upon my return to Philadelphia. I had originally planned to be, and I actually began to visit high schools and parishes and do confirmations, and that was kind of like my first week after my installation, and then coronavirus hit, and then we are now limited in gathering people together. No more than 10 groups, 10 people at a time, and masses had to be suspended. For now, obviously, for the common good, for society, and so that part is different. But we're exploring all sorts of different ways to bring church to people now that they can't really come to church, because we continue to be church. So I stream the Cathedral Mass at 11 o'clock every Sunday morning. Actually, tonight, May March 30th, today we're starting an online virtual Lenten retreat that goes online at 7 o'clock for 6 nights. It's entitled The Power of Faith and Hope in Times of Uncertainty. Very proper and appropriate,
Perfect.
Right? At this point where we're all uncertain. So we're trying our best, as well as our pastors all over the Archdiocese and all of our counties are doing a great job really reaching out to their flock through social media, as we're doing today.
So this was going to be an introductory interview, and then this all happened. And so It's kind of going to be both.
Sure.
But I just want to give you my impression of January 23rd of this year, when you were introduced to the media here in Philadelphia as the new Archbishop. And I'm sitting next to my co-anchor, Tamala Edwards, and I'm like, this guy looks really friendly and really fun. Mm-hmm. Am I right or wrong?
I hope so, on both accounts.
I mean, you have this presence, Archbishop, where it's very welcoming and very friendly. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's half intentional and half not.
Well, it is what it is. I've always been like that, like this. So it's not any merit on my part. It's just I'm an extrovert, so it's a matter of temperament.
What do you say to people whose faith is being tested right now, and people who ask the question, why is God doing this to us right now?
Well, first of all, I don't know if God is doing this. I don't believe in a God that would be up there in heaven and decide I'm going to send coronavirus to the world and have millions of people infected and thousands upon thousands die. So I don't. That's not the God I believe in. The God I believe in is a God of love. We do live in a world where people get sick and these things do happen. And God, for me, is not the cause. He's actually the strength, right? It's really rooted in that retreat theme, right? That our faith and our hope, which is rooted in the Lord, He's our strength to make it through. He's not the cause. He's not the adversary. So I wouldn't espouse to that this is somehow like a punishment from God. Like, God is love, God is our strength and our source of healing. If anything, that's what God is.
People look to their religion to try and understand things, and right now it's just not possible, is it?
Well, it's hard to understand. It's not the first time that it happens in history, right? Back in 1917, I think it was, or 18, the Spanish flu hit, our own city. So this is not the first time it happens, and these pandemics have happened several times. And I'm not an epidemiologist, so I can't tell you why it happens and how it happens. But I do know that these things also have the opportunity to kind of put things in the right order in our lives, right? Because a lot of the stuff that we normally day in and day out take for granted, sometimes our families, sometimes our own faith, and sometimes the presence of the divine in our own lives, and the simple things of life, right now they're not there as they readily were.
So I don't know how it works when you get this job.
Mm-hmm.
Does Pope Francis call you personally? Like, take me to the moment that you realize you're coming back to Philadelphia.
Well, the Pope didn't call me directly, and in fact, I was with him a little over a month before, at our ad limina visit for bishops in Rome, and had the chance to be with him and have private conversation with him. But he never mentioned a thing.
Okay.
But
he probably knew at that point, right?
I guess. I really don't know how they work these things, but all I know is I had just gotten up. I was down visiting my mom for Martin Luther King weekend, and the Apostolic Nuncio, who is the Holy Father's representative to the United States in any country, he called around. It was 8:45. I even remember the time, and he said, there's these infamous words, right, that when they call you for these things, I've had three of these calls now. Sure. Are you alone? And then you know that this is not like, what are you doing today type of call. Are you alone? And I says, oh, Archbishop. I said, you're not changing me, are you? And he said, you can't do that. I just got to Cleveland. I was a bishop of Cleveland. I was there for 2.5 years. I had just gotten there. And I says, I just got there. I got a lot of things, rolling, and you can't do that to them. You can't do this to me.
And this is before he even tells you where you're going.
Yeah. And so I said, and his response was, well, I'm not changing you. He says, but the Holy Father is. And he says, where are you sending me now? And then he said, are you sitting? And he said, yeah. And he said, Philadelphia. I said, Philadelphia? He said, you got to be kidding me. And I said, oh, no, Archbishop. There are other guys who are better suited than I am, have been a bishop longer than I have more administrative experience than I have.
It's because of the size of the
this is like the 7th largest diocese in the country, I believe. It's a historical diocese. And so I started actually rattling off names of other bishops. And I thought I was very coherent as to my reasons why they should be the Archbishop of Philadelphia. And he listened patiently for about 10 minutes as I, had my little cathartic moment. And then he says, I understand, but this is what the Holy Father is asking of you. And then it was done. Because it is what I signed up to do, not to be an archbishop, but to be obedient. Bottom line, this is what obedience looks like.
A little bit about your background.
Mm-hmm.
Born in Miami, educated in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
taught school in Puerto Rico, ordained as a priest in Philadelphia, pastor in Westchester, bishop in Cleveland, archbishop in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
It's kind of a windy path, but it kind of goes full circle in a way too. So does your religion allow you to believe in fate in any way? Or
well, God writes straight with crooked lines, right? And let me tell you, I was sad to leave Cleveland because the people of Cleveland were awesome. Cleveland really rocks, as they say, right? It really was awesome. And I love them dearly and made great friends there. But it's great to be home, too. I spent, over 30 years here. And while I often say, while I left ministerially, I didn't leave humanly. Because my friends and my network of people is actually here. It never left here. And have great friends. And it's great to be able to just, get in the car and go to a friend's house.
Sure.
And not be Archbishop. Just be Nelson. And that's a great thing. And I have that here. When you're outside of your element, you don't always have that. Because you're just what you are there. So it's great to be back. It's familiar, so it's awesome.
Did you ever go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame while you were in Cleveland?
It was 4 blocks away from where I lived on the cathedral in Cleveland. And many times on Thursdays, that's where I ended up for a couple of hours.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What are your favorite groups?
Well, I'm going to date myself, but I'm into the
Fine.
group from the 70s and REO Speedwagon,
Wow.
Bruce
Candle in a window in a
Springsteen.
cold, dark
Oh,
winter's
yeah.
night.
Genesis, all those people,
Okay.
70s and 80s. And
Peter Gabriel or Phil Collins Genesis?
Phil Collins.
Really?
Yeah.
Because the
Without
Peter
a doubt.
Gabriel stuff was kind of out there.
Yeah, he was. Phil Collins is great. Obviously we're all creatures of our moment.
Sure.
And the 70s and 80s was when I was like growing up, and you get stuck there.
Are you a Philly guy?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
What's a Philly guy? What does that mean to you?
Cheesesteaks. Cheesesteaks and pretzels. And you don't get cheesesteaks and pretzels, I have to tell you, anywhere in the country. Like you get them here. There's imitations of them.
Sure.
But not anything I would call a cheesesteak.
How about the attitude and personality of a Philly guy? What's that like?
Well, it depends on the area, right? So South Philly, these guys are tough, But generally, what I found in Philadelphia was people are family. People are neighborhoods. People are familiar with each other that way. There's something about being from Philly that you really only feel when you leave Philly, like anything else, right? Yeah, so you only appreciate something, again, like I said before,
Sure.
when you don't have it as you had it before. Other than that, it's just part of it. It kind of fades into the background. But when you leave Philly, like I did 8 years ago, you realize what a great town it is,
You're the first Hispanic Archbishop of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
During your news conference, you spoke in Spanish, and I think that probably meant so much to the members of your flock who speak Spanish in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Well, most of my ministry, right, in one way, shape, or form, touched the Hispanic community here. When I worked at St. Ambrose, I was the one that actually began that Spanish Mass that's there until today, back in the early 90s. And the work I did for the diocese in formation and lay ministry training. My parish were always multicultural. St. William, where I was a pastor, I was also a pastor at St. William for 8.5 years, was a multicultural community, had Hispanics, had Pakistani, and a strong Anglo community. Same thing with St. Agnes in Westchester. So while I'm a bishop that is able to cross cultures and languages that way, in an easy way, I don't see myself as a Hispanic bishop, though, because to me that actually doesn't exist. I'm a Catholic bishop that speaks Spanish, and I'm able to serve a certain segment of our people here in Philadelphia, as well as in the United States, because of language and because of culture.
During your news conference, you mentioned the sexual abuse scandal.
Sure.
Unprovoked. It was part of introducing yourself, and you apologized.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people who have left the church
Sure.
because they were disgusted by this.
I understand.
How do you get those people back?
Well, it's going to take time to build up trust, right? Like any trust that's broken in any relationship, it takes time to heal, and it takes time to reestablish those bonds once again. And I think the church collectively in the United States is doing everything it can to continue to do that, to reach out, to be there, to just be there for the people that have been hurt, to be there for our victims. It is something that's not exclusive to the church, but should have never happened in the church. And it continues to be, for me, a great source of pain and distress. I understand that there's probably no institution in the United States or in the world, but especially in the United States, that's done more to deal with this issue, and is now really kind of the go-to institution for other institutions that are grappling with the same thing, this is a human issue, not a church issue. It's a human issue. But having said that, it's painful. I was here in Philadelphia when when it broke here in Philadelphia, and it was tough. It was really, really tough. In pain for the victims, pain for the good priests that now were tainted in a way, right? And a really tough time. A really tough time.
You said you met Pope Francis recently. You probably met him several times.
Several times, yeah.
What's the guy like? I'd love to know some of the things that, like
He
the
comes,
inside stuff.
he comes across to me like one of my uncles. Very unassuming. Very unassuming. He has a great sense of humor. He's easy to talk to. In part, I'm sure it's his personality. It's also that Latin type of openness that I'm obviously so familiar with myself. So he's a delight to be with. The bishops of Region 6, Ohio and Michigan, that I was with on this meeting trip to Rome, we met with him for 2.5 hours. It was just him and us, and there was no script. He didn't give us a speech. He walked in and we sat in a circle, and he said, "By the way, that door is the bathroom, and if you want water, it's over there." And then he said, "We're all bishops here, so we're just going to have a conversation." And there it went for 2.5 hours.
One-on-one, do you speak Spanish
Yes.
with each other?
Yeah.
And then Latin is the...
Not me, but no, I speak Spanish with him. I took Latin, but I could never speak in Latin. Some of those guys in Rome actually can. But
Do you have his cell phone number? I mean,
No,
does
I
he
don't.
have an iPhone or something that he calls
Not
people
that
with?
I saw, but that was in the context.
Because that would be like the ultimate
Could you imagine? Pick
phone
up your
number and
send
your
him a
address
text.
book. Like, I just got a text from Pope Francis.
Yeah,
Look
can
at
you
this.
imagine? Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he had one, but I didn't see it.
Okay. Your predecessor, Archbishop Charles Chaput, he held obviously more conservative views than you do, and Pope Francis. We're talking about abortion, gun control, same-sex marriage. What should the people of Philadelphia, the people in the church, read into by seeing you and your appointment and being someone so different in terms of your views?
Well, I would have to say that that both Archbishop Chaput and I, we both walk with the church. So I'm faithful to the church's teaching. So in that way, there's not much difference between Archbishop Chaput and I. We walk with the teachings of the church, and I embrace the teachings of the church and actually love the teachings of the church. We might have different personalities. I'm an extrovert by nature, but that's just personality types maybe. But we both walk with the church and embrace the loving teachings of the church.
Both of you maybe have different visions then as to which path the church should be taking right now. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
It depends what you mean by that. I think both of us understand the church's call to the new evangelization, to make sure that we go to the teachings of the church in a solid way and present them in a way that's articulate. I don't think we have different paths. I know that at some points some in the media tried to make that comparison and stuff, maybe because of the way I present myself. I don't attribute to myself titles or like conservative or liberal. To me, I'm faithful to the church. That's what I promised I was going to be.
Some of those issues that I mentioned, I mean, I don't want to sit here and go through every single one, but is there one issue that you believe the church definitely needs to transform its thinking on?
I have to honestly say I believe in the sacredness of life. I believe in the sacredness and sanctity of marriage. The church's teaching really lies at the heart of who I am.
I'll throw one out at you then. Yeah. Women priests.
The church has said, listen, that's not something for us that we could change. That's what the church has said, that if the Lord wanted that, well, that would have happened. And that's not been the tradition of the church. And that goes back really 2,000 years now. So it's not something that has happened recently. And St. John Paul II kind of laid that conversation to rest.
Let's talk about your leadership style. What type of leader are you?
I try to lead through building consensus and collaboration. So I like to listen to different opinions on issues, and so I'm one that will bring people together in a huddle all the time. So I don't lead unilaterally at all. I like discussions back and forth. You know, I understand that and on some issues at the end I might have the final say, but I don't have that final say alone. So I look at what other people are thinking, and because I see God's guidance and wisdom coming through that. I don't have all the answers, nor do I present myself as one that has them. So I try to look at people who are smarter and more wiser than I am, and seek their counsel.
As a leader in the church, in corporate life, a lot of times you have to convince people to do things that they don't want to do, or they just don't see what you see. How do you convince people to do that?
Dialogue, and going back and forth, and understanding that some things are really a process that has a start and has an end, and that sometimes it takes a little while when I do have to do stuff like that. But I have to say, in my time as a bishop and even as a pastor, I haven't really had that much of an obstacle with that. You bring people along, and they bring you along as well.
Maybe it's your friendly personality.
Whatever it is.
Or you have some ability to hypnotize people or something.
No, I don't have that. I can't even hypnotize myself.
I want to talk about some things that are very spiritual and otherworldly and about religion. There's always this depiction of God as some guy, old man with a beard sitting on a chair. And we know that that's just not the case. When you imagine yourself meeting God one day, what do you see? Can you even explain what that experience might be for you? What would you see?
Well, as a Christian, for me, the image actually of God, the sign, or we would say the sacrament, right, is actually Christ. So that Christ is the ultimate expression of what God is like. It's the inside of his heart becoming visible in the person of Christ, and ultimately, what does that look like? At the end, it looks like love. It looks like love. Now, not love the way we understand it to be all the time, right? Because love, oftentimes, we reduce to like a feeling, right? And something that's effective. But ultimately, love involves desiring the good of the other. And that's what God desires of all of us. I guess the greatest image of that is actually that of Father, right? Those of you who are dads understand that.
Yes.
more than I do, right? Because I'm not a dad. I don't know if you're a dad.
I have two children.
You have two children. So you're able to understand that in a way that I can't. Right? Because you wake up in your morning and you see your kids, and you desire their good. And in fact, you literally will give your life up for them. If it became a choice between them and you, you're gone. Right? Because you desire their good. And you don't have to have a week to think about it. You would do it in an instant, right? That's God.
What you do is great sacrifice, becoming a priest. You can never marry, you can never have children. Do you ever wish that you did? Do you ever yearn for having children of your own?
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt.
How do you get through that?
Well, because the fact is that right now I have 1.4 million children, right? And in that way, that's the children of the Church of Philadelphia. And in a very real way, you're their father, right? In fact, that's what they used to call me too. In fact, there are people in Philadelphia that they don't call me Monsignor or Bishop or Archbishop or Excellency. For them, I'm Father Nelson. That's all I've been to them, and always will be for them. And it's probably of all the titles that the world and the church has given to me, it's actually the most profound of them all, because you really are a father. So yeah, would I have longed to be married and had children? Well, yeah. But I don't regret what I did. Never for a moment. Because in many ways, I've been a father to many. Actually, in ways that are even broader than the way you're a dad to two kids.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk too much about things we don't know, but there's this idea that, when we go to the other place, so there's hell, there's heaven, and there's purgatory. What nowadays is the church talking about and thinking about these concepts?
Well, those are they are the traditional teachings of the church, right? But like anybody else, I accept them and assent to them in faith. So when you go and see it, tell me what it's like, because at the end we're in the same boat, with that. Those are the teaching of the church as rooted in our scriptures and in the tradition of the church. They're part of our Christian spirituality.
I think the way that you describe what it would be like to meet God, it's probably similar as to whether what heaven would be like. It's not something that it's not a place up there. It's
right.
not a room.
There's no rocket that could take you there, right? It's a state of the soul.
Sure.
The state of the soul.
So when Easter arrives in a couple of weeks, and you won't have churches filled with people all across the region, and you won't be saying Mass to a filled church here at the cathedral, I was wondering if maybe you could kind of give me a preview of what you were going to be talking about in your homily on Easter, because I know you'll be doing some online services. What do you think your message is going to be about?
Hope. If there's anything about Easter that lies at the center of its message, is actually hope, right? Because what we celebrate at Easter is the basic foundational mystery of Christianity. Oftentimes we want to reduce Christianity to like an ethic of life, right? So we'll ask, people are, well, what is it like to be a Christian? And people, you're kind and loving and merciful and forgiving and generous and all those things are true, right? But you don't have to be a Christian to be kind and loving and merciful and generous and forgiving. You don't have to be a Christian to do that. In fact, there might be other people who are not Christians that do it better than we do, right? That's not what lies at the center of being a Christian. What lies at the center of being a Christian is that we believe that a dead man rose back to life, right? And what is that? It gives us hope, right? That even when things appear to be final, there's nothing more final than death, apparently. Christianity comes along and says, don't be too sure. Don't be too sure. There's a movie called Jesus of Nazareth. It was directed by a guy named Zeffirelli. It'll probably be shown on TV. It's 3 hours long. It's a beautiful movie, probably the best one.
Religious movies tend to be pretty long.
They are. This one's fast. This one, I think it was done in like the 70s or something. It's incredible. At the very end of that movie, there is a scene where the soldier, it comes from the scriptures, goes to the grave because they tell him that they stole the body. And what Zeffirelli did was, instead of watching the soldier come to the tomb and stick his head in, he stuck the camera inside the tomb. So what you see, the image that you see, is the darkness of the grave and the openness of the door, or the entrance to this sepulcher. And you see that the soldier, this Roman centurion, sticks his head and his body inside this black tomb, and the camera is looking at him now coming in, and he looks around, and what he says is, now it all begins. He says, that's it.
Wow. On the other side of this pandemic, there will be changes. What have you thought about what's going to happen when we come out on the other side?
Well, I hope that people will have changes of heart, that they will hopefully value that which maybe that we all took for granted, that was so readily available, especially in this country. That's a country of such abundance, right? We get upset now to go to the supermarket and there's no milk. There are some countries that there's no milk all the time, right? And we stand there in front of the milk refrigerator at the supermarket and become indignant that there's no milk, that we appreciate what we have, right? Because the Lord has blessed us with a lot. That somehow, in some way, it would also touch our hearts and become closer to God, and closer to the people around us. Because lots of incredible stuff is actually happening in neighborhoods and stuff. A friend of mine sent me a video the other night. She lives in a neighborhood, and at 8 o'clock every night for about 5-10 minutes, all the neighbors come out to their porches. They bang on pots and pans, make noise, and say hello to each other and have a toast. Well, that's a great thing, actually, because oftentimes we live within our own little castles, and we might wave from a distance or nod our heads and then go into and lock our doors and bring down our curtains. I would hope that we would come out of here with a more profound sense of community as well.
Do you fear that the social distancing aspect is going to create new habits that will make us less social creatures?
No, because it's in our nature. I think for a while people will be cautious, and it probably might be good, because I don't think this. I'm not an epidemiologist, so I don't know, or a virologist, but I don't think like the coronavirus is going to be here today and gone tomorrow, right? So people are going to be cautious and stuff for a while, but we will go back to how God made us, and God really made us to live in family and live in community.
There are so many people who are suffering right now, whether it's the loss of a job,
Mm-hmm.
maybe their health is a problem right now. Maybe they're just completely in distress emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
If one of these people were to come to you and say, Archbishop Perez, will I be okay? What would you tell them?
I would say rely on the strength and the power of faith and hope, right? Because that's what's going to give you peace in your heart. And I would say, yeah, you'll be okay.
Archbishop Nelson Perez on the True Philadelphia podcast. Thanks so much for giving your time.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be with you and meet you.
Our thanks to Archbishop Perez. He says he is taking his temperature twice a day and is being very careful to not get sick. We resisted shaking hands or embracing. We sat more than 6 feet away from each other. I sanitized my equipment before the interview, the chair and table afterwards, all things we never would have imagined doing just 1 month ago. I'm Matt O'Donnell, and thank you for listening to the True Philadelphia podcast.